even as supposedly young as I am, was my time is my time. It's okay. And I would rather invest completely in a vibrant, excited, abundant, enthusiastic life and outlook than put myself and my family through an arduous long-term thing. It sounds unrighteous, un-American to resign. I mean, I think part of a healthy disposition is to simply not feel like you have to fight every circumstance that comes into your life. There's a time to fight, and there's a time to just to relax and embrace a healing concept.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Beyond Labels. I'm your co-host, Dr. Sina McCullough. I'm here with Joel Salatin, our favorite farmer. Hi, Joel.
Hi, Sina.
All right. Today we have an interesting story. This story is about the first genetically modified pig heart that has been successfully transplanted into a human patient. Now, we reported on this company. The company that created this genetically modified pig heart is Revivicor. It's a Virginia-based company. And you and I, over a year ago, reported on that company because they were the first to get a genetically engineered pig approved for human consumption. That was back in December of 2020. And now they are harvesting organs from pigs to do transplants into humans. So this is from the article. It says, the latest promising update in humans' quest to harvest life-saving organs from our four-legged porcine friends saw a team of surgeons at the University of Maryland Medical Center successfully implant a heart taken from a genetically modified pig into the body of a 57-year-old Maryland resident. This marks the first time that a pig's heart has been successfully transplanted into a human. The operation was granted emergency authorization by the FDA on December 31st through the agency's compassionate access provisions. So the last I checked, the man is still alive and he's actually starting physical therapy. So what I wanted to dive into is a little bit of, we'll get your opinion on this, but before I do that, let me tell you from this article what they've said had to happen in order for this pig heart to be accepted by the human body. So the donor pig was genetically modified by Revivicor. The company made 10 genetic alterations. 4 of the pig's genes were inactivated. 6 human genes were inserted into the genome, and 9 of the edits were made to reduce the chances that the human body would reject the new heart after transplant. The last genetic mutation or genetic editing was made to stop the excessive growth of the pig tissue once the heart was implanted. Then they further increased the chance that the heart would not be rejected by having another company create an experimental drug that was designed to suppress the human immune system, preventing the body from immediately fighting back against the foreign implant. Now, we know that's common, right? Even when you have a human organ that's transplanted into another human, you go on immunosuppressives. But in this situation, according to the doctors, there was more of a risk because more immunosuppressive medication is required for a pig to human heart transplant. And so they don't know the long-term side effects of that. All right, Joel. Initial thoughts.
Well, I think just as a point of information for our listeners, it's important to realize that pigs continue to grow. There's indication that pigs will obviously they have a growth cycle just like a human, but they actually don't stop growing. They just continue to grow and grow and grow over time. And so this heart, whereas the human reaches your homeostasis, your maturity, and everything just stops, a pig, if you continue to feed it, just continues to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And so this is a fascinating thing that they had to put they had to put a gene in the heart so that the heart would stop growing and not continue to grow in the human. It would literally eventually fill the body cavity, if that were allowed to grow. These things start from a very sincere place. It's hard to say, well, we shouldn't be trying to elongate somebody's life. And having a discussion about just humbly resigning to death, is maybe the topic of another whole discussion. And what do you give up? What do you give up? I mean, I'm remembering reading about some very primitive tribes in Brazil, in the Amazon rainforest, as they've been touched by the white civilization, and how the village actually comes around and decides whether to go seek medical help for people. Is it worth that whole investment, or could we do something else with that money, that time, that investment? And those are questions that, as Western society, we have this anathema toward death, that we should prolong death, even if it's for a year, for a week, no matter what happens. The right, or whatever, the noble, the righteous response is always to prolong life for another day. And that's an interesting assumption, and I'm not sure that what we're seeing is worth that. But what are your thoughts?
So this is a sensitive subject for me, because my mother had a kidney transplant, and she was on the wait list for many, many years. And that's the reason the company is giving for creating these different organs for hemotransplant, is all the deaths from people waiting on the transplant list. So they're saying that there's about 100,000 people reportedly on the wait list, and 17 people die every day in the US waiting for a transplant. So I can understand both sides of this, because like I said, my mother received a kidney transplant, and we waited a long time for that. But on the other hand, I feel like we know that you can reverse disease, right? Had I been involved in my mother's healing journey earlier, she would not have lost that kidney, because we know the steps to reverse kidney disease. But that was more of I wasn't welcomed into the story at that point. We did save her kidney, the remaining kidney, later in life. So we know that this can happen. We know that we can reverse disease, that we can heal these different organs. We know this without a doubt from the research of stem cells, and we see people reversing diseases across the country. So for me, I feel like this is unnecessary, because we have a way to get healthy without having to harvest organs from animals. So my heart breaks for the animals that we're utilizing, right? We're trying to manipulate nature to prolong our lives, instead of learning how to live alongside nature and live by nature and nature's laws, and tap into that healing power that we all have inside of us. So I feel like it's unfortunate that the message that your body can heal itself is not more well known. It's not yelled out by mainstream media and social media. It's really a shame, because now we've got to this position where we're utilizing animals we're manipulating their unique genetic makeup in order to prolong our lives. So I just think that it's an unnecessary thing. I totally am compassionate toward the people who are on the wait list. You know, as I said, I've been through it as the daughter of somebody on a wait list. I know the emotional ups and downs behind it. But it would be great if instead of spending all this money, all this time, all this investment, you know, and changing genes of an animal, instead of focusing on that, let's focus on getting the message out and helping people to reverse disease by utilizing and harnessing that power that's inside all of us.
You know, in business, we call this opportunity cost. Opportunity cost is the cost of, well, we've got three things. We've got three things we can invest in. And if we choose this one to invest in and don't invest in that one, what's the cost of not investing in that one? You got A, B, C, and you pick, well, we're gonna invest in B. Well, what's the opportunity cost of not investing in A? And of course, you know, businesses, you know, we make these decisions all the time because you know, you can't do everything. There's only so much time in a day. There's only so much money. You know, you can't do everything. And so if we take that look here and say, you know, what's the opportunity cost in not in investing in, you know, the GMO pig and all of the ramifications, of course, and this is very early on. You know, we don't know, for example, we don't know the multi-year dimension of these genetically altered pigs. We don't know what their future holds. We don't know what the future of this guy holds either. And so, you know, I think it's too early to jump up and down and say, oh, good, you know, we've got a cure. And so I would just beg the question, what's the opportunity cost in investing in this as opposed to investing in all of the things that we know, you know, can reverse disease? And you and I have both seen almost, I mean, you know, from a human standpoint, we'd call it almost miraculous healings and changes in people who, you know, who completely changed their whole physical, emotional, spiritual outlook, and suddenly, you know, things change. And so if I mean, we're kind of going back to when I you know, when I had my kind of protocol for building the immune system. You know, what if Anthony Fauci came out next week and said, all right, we're going to spend a month building our immune systems, and we're going to all you know, not drink Coke for a month, and we're not going to eat junk food for a month, and we're going to get, you know, 20 minutes of exercise, work up a sweat every day. We're going to spend 20 minutes in the sun, get some vitamin D every day. We're going to drink a half a gallon of water every day. We're going to get 8 hours of sleep a night. And, you know, and we're going to, we're gonna, you know, make a list of all the people we hate and forgive them, you know, those kind of things, you know. In other words, the opportunity cost that our nation has lost by not going with that kind of investment in that protocol. You know, we don't know what the cost of that is. You know, we just don't know what and now we're starting to see the costs in children and masking. We're seeing elementary kids drawing pictures, doing artwork of people with no faces. You know, we don't know what those ramifications are. And so, the fact that we know that there are significant alternatives and refuse to invest in them and promote them, you know, does, you know, beg the question of opportunity cost in this instance, even though absolutely both you and I appreciate. I mean, there's a family in our church. It's got a guy, he's young, he's like 30 years old and getting kidney transplants, and he's just in and out. He's got double pneumonia, he's got COVID, he's got, I mean, and just every week there's another, you know, terrible thing that's happened. you know, a lot of people don't know. I've told my family I'm not that old, but I have a no resuscitate. If I have a heart attack tomorrow, I don't I don't want to be brought back. I you know, even as supposedly young as I am, um, when it's my time, it's my time, it's my time. It's okay. And I would rather invest completely in a vibrant, excited, abundant, enthusiastic life and outlook than then put you know then put myself and my family through an arduous long-term you know long-term thing. You know, it sounds whatever, unrighteous, you know, un-American to resign to I mean, I think part of a healthy disposition is to simply not feel like you have to fight every circumstance that comes into your life. There's a time to fight, and there's a time to just to relax and embrace, but embrace, you know, embrace a healing concept.
Yeah. And like what you were saying, when somebody receives a transplant, it could save their life, right, for a given period of time, but it doesn't actually solve the underlying root problem of why they needed that transplant in the beginning, right? So it's like you're saying, if you don't address the diet and lifestyle of the individual and you just give the transplant, you haven't actually solved the problem. You're kind of just kicking the can down the road. And we saw this with my mother, for instance, once she received the kidney transplant. Well, what happened? That a disease formed in the new kidney, right? And why? Because the root problem, the root cause of the original kidney disease was not actually addressed. So, so that's one short-sightedness of a transplant. However, if someone isn't aware that they can actually reverse the disease or, you know, heal an organ, then I can see how they would think that's their last resort, right? That's the only option on the table. So that's the point is, you know, for like, that's one reason why I have a little more peace of mind, knowing that like we're doing these podcasts, for instance, and doing our health summits so that we are part of the solution. And I'm not just sitting back holding on to this information that might help somebody. I'm actually putting it out there. So hopefully more and more people will hear these kinds of messages. There's lots of people talking about them. But so that's one of the points. It doesn't actually solve the problem. The other thing that's concerning to me is I see it as a slippery slope that's going to potentially move us down the road to people eventually being more likely to accept GMOs in many areas of our lives, including the food supply. All right. And this is one reason why is, so check this out. I came up with this list of mammalian byproducts that are already commonly used in medications, vaccines, and other therapeutics. So just some examples. Sometimes we get thyroid medication from pig thyroids. We get pancreatic enzymes derived from a pig pancreas. Heparin can be derived from a pig intestine. Vaccines can contain gelatin that's derived from either cows or pigs. In terms of tablets, magnesium stearate is commonly used as a binder and a lubricant, and it can actually be derived from mammals. And pig heart valves have also already been used. So we're already using, right? We already got comfortable. The society already accepted the use of these mammalian body parts to make these various products, from therapeutics to vaccines to medications to supplements. And now they're ushering in a genetically engineered mammal to save lives, right? And they're not the only ones doing it. Well, so they did it. This was their second, quote unquote, significant achievement. in the realm of pig transplant. Just last September, at New York University, the same company, RevivorCore, they transplanted a kidney from the genetically modified pig into a patient. The patient was already brain dead, and the kidney was kept outside of the body for observations for about 54 hours. And the surgeon said that was the first time that the animal donor wasn't immediately rejected by the human. So they've done this with kidney. And then there's other agencies that are also separate companies that are also using genetically engineered animals. So this is becoming a trend now. There's one called, so the FDA gave Xenotherapeutics the go-ahead to begin clinical trials to study whether live skin cells derived from genetically engineered pigs could be used to treat severe burns in humans. That was in 2019. And then we have a couple startups. One's Miromatrix and eGenesis. They've attracted millions of dollars to develop gene edited pigs for, again, for organ donation. So this isn't just one company, this is a trend. And we have these startups also doing this. So my concern is, I think this is an argument that supporters of genetic engineering can win, right? Because are you going to be the one to say, oh, that child should die instead of getting an organ from this genetically modified pig, you know? And if it was your child that for whatever reason, acute injury in a car accident or whatnot, needed an organ transplant, are you going to say no because the only one available is a genetically engineered, you know, pig organ? So this becomes a very difficult argument. And so I feel like this is one way where they can get they can gain some ground on pushing the narrative that of genetically engineered not only animals but humans. I mean, we already have the genetic engineered salmon, right, and other foods like the non-browning apple, for instance. So I feel like this is a slippery slope that we are going down. This is a difficult argument. I don't think that those of us who just don't support genetic engineering, I don't think we're going to win this argument. And it's going to become normalized in our society.
I think you're exactly right, and our society for sure is not willing to accept a more a more primitive view. I was just and I hate to say primitive, maybe a more primal, but a more aboriginal. We could even say a more Native American view. I mean, I'm just now reading the 1837 letters from George Catlin, who was the artist who traveled for years among the Native Americans and kind of captured their final glory, you know, before they were overrun by by whites. And I was just reading about death, about those societies, and of course, you know, they had their medicine men, they had their herbal remedies, they did their normal things, but he quoted them as saying almost every single death was in their sleep. They, you know, they would get old and they would be fine, and they just didn't wake up the next morning, and that was normal. Now, I mean, people died in, you know, they got injured and they fought each other all the time. I'm not trying to make this sound like some sort of a nirvana, but it was fascinating to me that they basically did not have any degenerative diseases. And they took a very resigned or humble view to end of life, and we have not cultivated that in our society. I'm even thinking of, like, you know, when that young kid broke into that Amish school in Pennsylvania, 15, 20 years ago, and shot those 6 children, killed those 6 Amish children. And the Amish community, they did not press charges against him. They immediately gathered and said, you know, we obviously don't like what he did, and we're grieving, but we forgive him. We forgive him unconditionally right away. Um, that is such a non-Western, whatever, non-commercial, non-celebrity culture. It's such a different way of viewing. And I know you and I are talking about a very, very difficult topic here, and I don't think either one of us purports to have all the answers. What we are trying to put on the table is that the philosophical foundation of viewing life as fundamentally mechanical and a bunch of parts, that's a slippery slope. Embracing and endorsing something too quickly without giving it, years to play out, that's a slippery slope. That's a problem. And investing in a continued technically expensive and difficult procedure, as opposed to an opposite view of personal of the capacity of the body and a family and a community to surround to heal. Those are all three things that we're willing to say, wait a minute, let's not celebrate yet. And I think that's our main message here, that there are alternatives. There are other things that just they're not as glitzy. They're not as techno exciting. And for some reason, our culture worships at this altar of technology, as opposed to the full holistic element of the human condition.
Yeah, I agree. And so one of my big takeaways is, I think it would be beneficial for all of us, you and I included, of course, to approach situations with more humility, right? That we don't know all the answers. We don't know the unintended consequences. And to understand that what we call progress isn't always beneficial, right? It's not always better. A lot of times, especially in mainstream medicine, we think of ancient cultures, ancient herbal remedies, for instance. We think of them as like antiquated, right? That those are ineffective. Those are what people back in the Stone Age did, right? Mm-hmm. Like now we're modern, we're sophisticated, right? We're civilized. And so we tend to get wrapped up into that. And so we demonize, almost we turn our backs on anything that's not, quote unquote, technological progress, right? And so we actually, a lot of us see it as lesser than these technological, quote unquote, advancements. But when you look back, just like what you were saying with the book you were reading, if you look back at, say, hunter-gatherer civilizations, we now know, based on more current evidence, that they lived almost as long as we do. Like once you subtract out death from childbirth and a childhood death, once you made it past childhood, you lived almost as long as we do today. And the difference is, like you said, you didn't live in a state of chronic sickness, right? You lived healthy almost up until the point where you died. And they think oftentimes they too died in their sleep. So they didn't have this conundrum of how are we going to try to keep people alive, as long as possible? How are we going to fight death, right? Because they were healthy. And how are they healthy, right? They had clean diets, right? And they used herbals. These, they could, a lot of them, depending on obviously the location in which they lived, some herbs and such were available in some areas year round and some weren't. But the point is, they did consume things like medicinal herbals on more of a daily basis, right? And they were closer to nature. They were in the dirt. They had a strong microbiome. All these things that we are more separated from now, that as I was just explaining, seem kind of antiquated, too ancient, too remedial for the rest of us to do, kind of backwards in some ways. So if we can just humble ourselves and see the value that the ancient wisdom holds for us, we would be much better served, I think.
Yeah, and I think just to make as we wrap up here, we've got to finish. But I think you and I both agree we're not interested in making this this GMO experimentation and the whole thing that we've described. We're not interested in making it illegal. We're not saying this should not be done, and that this fellow is evil for participating in the study. We're simply trying to use this as maybe an example, as an extreme example right now of our society's kind of unilateral endorsement of a procedure that you and I would like to put on the table has alternatives. And that's the whole idea, is that there are alternatives to this, even to the notion that I'm supposed to continue to live another 2 weeks at all costs. I mean, that is an extreme notion, in my opinion. And so, we just put this kind of at a point of reference. It's a tough discussion, one of the toughest discussions anyone can ever have. And there are not easy answers on this. I'm reminded, if I can just finish with one thing. I had a friend whose dad had a heart attack, and he when he came back, when they got him back, he was a different person. He had always been a very warm, loving guy, and his last it gave him another 5 years of life, and those 5 years he swore, he was short-tempered, he was a completely different person. And my friend said that 100 years ago his dad would have passed away and they would have had all these fond memories, and now technology has enabled the family to now deal with issues that the human is not supposed to deal with. And there's a cost to that. There is a real cost to that. And I think you and I both know, yeah, we preach wellness, but look,
Yeah, I would agree. And as somebody who has taken care of 2 sick parents, that life was prolonged for many, many years, it's very taxing on the caregiver. I mean, we have lots of studies on this published in scientific literature about how their immune system is suppressed. The caregiver themselves, their immune system is suppressed. They have it takes them longer to heal from illnesses, common colds, the flu, cuts, so it is a very taxing situation. And I think this is something, generations ago, you didn't have to really deal with that as much, right? We were a healthier society in general. You took care of the elders, but they weren't necessarily as sick as a lot of our elders are getting now. And so it wasn't as taxing, generally speaking. There's always, a caveats to everything. But as we've gotten sicker and sicker as a nation, we are faced with this. Now we are prolonging lives, sicker for longer, and it's taxing on the person who is sick. I saw it myself in both my parents. And it's taxing on the caregiver who's trying to, in our case, raise up the next generation. And you only have so much energy, so much resources to give before you burn out. And that's what happened to me. Almost got sick again after trying to take care of 2 sick parents at the same time. So it is, and again, like you said, we're not judging anybody. right? Everyone gets to make their own decisions, and we want freedom of choice to remain, right? We don't want to outlaw anything here. It's just more of, let's bring this up and have an open discussion about it. And so we can all individually figure out where it is that we lie in this situation, because this isn't going anywhere. As we said, more and more of these products are being produced in labs now. So let's just get the ball rolling and start figuring out where we stand.